Welcome to Color Mixing Essentials Part 4. In this section, we're going to cover analogous color schemes. I'm going to explain to you what analogous colors are, and we're also going to learn the difference between warm and cool color schemes. So in your PDF, you should have printed out the page 4 color schemes. And on here has examples of warm colors that's considered warm colors and colors that are considered cool. So what is analogous color schemes? Well, analogous is 3 or more colors that sit on the wheel next to each other. So for example, if I was to pick red and I wanted to create an analogous color scheme around red, I can go 3 colors this way, and that would be a color scheme right there. I could also go this way, making a color scheme where it's purple, red, violet, and all the way to orange. And that would be considered an analogous color scheme. It could also be just these 3 colors. That would be also considered a color scheme, analogous color scheme. Another example for an analogous color scheme, if I was to choose, say, yellow, and I only chose 2 colors on the color wheel next to it, that could actually be a color scheme. If I was to add yellow-orange, that still feels like a family. So the purpose of analogous color schemes is that when you paint within those color schemes, or the analogous grouping, it starts to feel kind of cohesive. It starts to create some sort of harmony. Now on your printout, I gave you a couple of examples. And these, you can even use these for your exercises. This is green, and I went towards the blue side on the wheel, and that gave sort of a blue-greenish family. So this starts to create, this is going to start to help you create themes for your color combination. So when you're working on your artwork, you might have, say, you started out with a purple, sort of a magenta, a red, violet, and then you were thinking, well, what color do I need to add to that would make it really interesting? Well, you could go onto your color wheel and realize, well, I have these colors in my artwork. What if I were to add orange? And then that can actually create some dynamic feel to it. So that is what color analogous is. And what I'm going to show you here are some examples. So, for example, this is considered a warm and a cool. Now the reason why they're considered warm and cool is because this one is really mostly utilizing the analogous group that's on the cool side of the color wheel. These colors are considered cool. They feel cool. And then this is a warm analogous color scheme, and that is also on this side of the color wheel, which is warm. I had another example of that is I used blue and a little bit of green with this one. So you really get a sense of how you can create themes around this principle. Here's another one. It's more of the green and the blue. So you want to select a group of colors that are next to each other on the color wheel for this exercise. Now another thing that I did here is you'll notice a little one piece in the puzzle is a different color. The reason why I did that is I wanted to help you guys see that when you add the complementary color to that color scheme, how that really creates some interesting dynamic, interesting energy around that. So, for example, again, let's take a look at that. This is considered on the blue and green analogous family. And what is the opposite of that? I added the complementary to that family. Now, this could have been orange, which is fine, but I added red just so you can get an idea that any of these colors here would be considered a complementary to this family. Same thing here. Because I was using more purples, more in the analogous of blue and purples, I decided to go with a yellow-orange as my complementary piece. So this is an idea of what you're going to be working on in this section. So let's get, before we get started, let's make sure that you have two puzzle pieces that you're going to be creating these with. So let's get started. So I'm going to walk you through doing your analogous family on your puzzle piece. And what I'm doing is I'm selecting the analogous family of red, red-violet, violet, and blue. So I've already started out with red, and we did one piece with 100% red. I'm going to do another one, and I wanted to show you that when you use a smaller brush, you can actually control painting these little pieces much better. So I have a smaller brush, and I'm just outlining the piece first, and then I can go in and fill it. Much easier to do. And if you have a bigger brush, it's harder to control getting up to the edges. Okay, another thing that I have is I have white on my palette so that I can actually add white to my analogous pieces. So I'm creating a red violet, and don't forget to rotate your tiles. It's easier to paint that way. And then I'm going to do a lighter version of this red violet. So I'm adding a little bit of white to it. It gives me a lighter version of that, but that's still going to be within the family. Now I'm going to do more of a violet. And I'm going to do more of a blue violet. And I actually lightened that as well. So this is a tint of that red that I'm plugging in there. And the reason why I'm having you also do tints is that you can see how when you pick an analogous color scheme or group of colors that are on that same family and you lighten it, it'll still feel very much part of that family. Now I'm also going to leave one empty puzzle piece, and I'll show you why. But I'm going to finish this up. Okay, so with that piece, that empty piece, I'm going to actually pick a opposite color. So since this is the family that I've been working with, I'm going to pick an opposite color of that, which will probably be maybe like an orange yellow or yellow orange. And the reason why I'm doing that is you'll see how this really feels like a cool family, and when you go and put a complementary color in there, it'll feel like almost like it works together, but that it really is a contrast to it. And sometimes when you're working with on your artwork and you have a color scheme that works, it's balanced, it's harmonious, but you wanted to add something extra like that would contrast the entire piece nicely, you can purposely go in there and choose an image or paint an area that is of the complementary color to that scheme. Okay, so there you go. And if you want, and I would suggest doing another puzzle piece, a puzzle tile with a different analogous family. So we're going to move on to the final exercise of color mixing essentials. Okay, so welcome to the final exercise in this course, and this is what I call a color analysis. So at this time, you should be able to have a sense of what colors it takes to mix a color when you want to duplicate it out of an image or nature. Now, I know this can be intimidating, but trust me, with the amount of exercises and the understanding of all the principles that we've just gone over, you should be able to do this as close as possible. I don't expect you to do this perfectly because, like I said, it takes a long time to really practice and develop an eye for color. So this is a color analysis. What I did is I cut some images out of magazine, and I went ahead and tried to detect different colors that were in the image and began to duplicate them by mixing certain colors. And again, you are still using the primary colors plus white plus black. So that's what you're going to be using for this exercise. And so what I'm going to do is kind of run through. I already have a blank piece of watercolor paper, and then I put some magazine clippings on here, and I just glued them on, and then I'm going to start analyzing what's in this image. So with this, I'm seeing, wow, this is kind of a blue, so there might be a little bit of a green in there. So I'm going to start mixing a little bit of, but there's a lot of white, and I'm going to start mixing the primary colors that I think go together to make that blue. Now that blue, for example, is pretty close to the primary color, but there's almost a little bit of a hint of yellow in there. Very small, minute. And then what I'll do is try to see where that lands. Is it close? Getting kind of close there. And then I'll put a swash down for that to represent. Now there might be a little off, and I could fine-tune that, but that's okay. I'm going to just stick with that for now. Now also, I want to say in this shadow right here, there is that same color, but there's a black. So I'm going to try to duplicate that. Now you don't have to get as technical as I am, but I'm going to just show you, for example, how I'm doing this exercise. So that actually represents the shadow in that image. So now I'm going to play with trying to get this cream. And that cream is a lot of white with a little bit of yellow. But I think there's a hint of red in there because it's really not a yellow. It's really kind of a cream, which, wow, that's pretty close, which is a little bit of orange in there. So I'm mixing yellow and red to get that color. And that's all you're really doing. Now I want to try to duplicate that, which is going to require more, not so much white, but maybe a little bit of black in the orange. Now also detect if you feel like, well, that's kind of a muted orange, you might decide to introduce a complementary color to that. Now I'm going to do that dark brown. Now remember what I showed you in when we were doing complementary colors, that green and red make brown, right? And I think even a little bit of black in there might be good. Now that's a little tricky because it's hard to control. You want to be careful that it doesn't go into mud. That's pretty close. Okay, so I'm going to try to do the pink, which is red and white, but I feel like there might be a little bit of lavender in there, so I'm just going to put a hint of blue in there and a lot of white. And then of course there's violet in there. So you can see what I'm actually going for when I'm creating. I'm sort of analyzing what colors are in here, and at the same time it's almost creating a little bit of a color scheme. There's my purple or violet. So that's what you're going to do with the next image as well. So I would suggest, if you really want to practice this, to do a few of these, and you'll get really good at seeing what colors are used to mix, what colors are used in mixing to try to get certain colors in there. And this also gives you the skill to duplicate a color that you like, that you see in an image. So that's it for Color Mixing Essentials. I am so excited that I was able to walk you through these lessons, and I hope that you got much more comfortable mixing colors.